I'm gonna share what I read in April. So I only got to one book in April, and it could be because I was so busy and caught up with my trip to London and Paris. I just couldn't find time to read more than one book. But also, I was the most immersed, and I had a very similar reading experience that I had with Abigail by Magda Szabo. And it might even be one of my favorite books of the year with Abigail. My anticipated read for April, The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. This was the only book I read in April, and honestly, I don't mind that. This was such a lovely book to read, and looking back, I cannot even express the emotional attachment that I had to this book when I was reading it. First, the prose is just so darling and so posh. So Elizabeth von Arnim was born in Australia but moved to England at a very young age. She was actually a child of the Victorian age, which might be a good explanation for her writing style. And the beginning of the story got me hooked. They were talking about appreciating wisteria and sunshine. I was already latched to the very beginning of this book, and I could not put it down. So I did read this with an audiobook, which I really like doing. It's called immersive reading, and you can read along as the narrator is reading it out loud, which I think is a really good way to practice expanding vocabulary and also comprehension skills. It's actually something I would heavily recommend for those who are just starting out reading or want to get back into reading, because I know in this day and age with social media and everybody having a very short attention span, it can get very difficult to read something that you haven't read or you don't feel familiar reading in such a long time and then fully comprehend every single thing that's being written down. Anyways, that's a completely different tangent I can talk about for another video, but the story follows two women who discovers an advertisement in a newspaper that is inviting others to stay at this medieval castle in Italy. It is obviously happening during the spring. I think it's occurring around Easter or a little bit before Easter holidays. And the women who found the advertisements found two other women to join them for this vacation. All of the characters are respectively different in their own way, in their own manner, and majority of them are just trying to get away from the desolating and depressing environment of London. And so when they get to the castle and begin their vacation, the women are slowly warming up to each other, bonding with one another, and ultimately they find solace in each other's company as well as with themselves. This is such a lighthearted, wholesome book. And I saw a comment from a previous video about somebody saying that they were not expecting something to abruptly happen in the middle of the book. And I also understood that feeling. I think a part of me was also expecting a bomb to drop, like something terrible was going to happen. And this could be the habit of reading so many devastating and suspenseful, but also really dark and heavy topic related books. And as I continue reading, I'm expecting the worst to happen. But obviously, there's nothing extremely terrible that really occurs anywhere during this book aside from the men, the husbands. I feel like that's a little tidbit as to what I meant with something abrupt happening, but I did enjoy this overall. Even up until the ending, it left my heart very warm and a lingering sensation. Very difficult to describe. I just think everybody should read this. It's such a nice experience, and I would highly, highly recommend listening to the audiobook. And if anybody has recommendations to books that might even be remotely similar to The Enchanted April, please let me know. I am in need of more lighthearted books like this. There is a movie that was released back in 1991, I believe. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm actually considering. I did take a look at the cast, and they weren't what I had imagined them to look like, but I don't want that to stop me from watching it at all. I've been on like a movie craze lately. I will actually talk about the movies that I've watched this year. in a separate segment later on in this video. I don't want to compile everything into this one single segment. So I'm gonna go and do work, and I'll catch you guys in a little bit. Finally.
I don't know. My friend ate 80 per person.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait, that was nice. Existing in this really awesome landscape of vibrancy, right? There's like 3,000 of us.
Please use this as your reflection.
What's your shop hour? That's special.
I just wanted to come on here to give a quick little reading update because I was just reading Don't Stop by Bonnie Friedman before I head out today. I am less than 60 pages in, and I'm afraid that I might want to DNF this book. I'm noticing that as I continue reading the book, it's giving me a very similar experience to a book I had DNF'd back in March called The Unpassing by Chia Lin. I usually don't really like to DNF books. I feel like a lot of books just have some potential, especially because I'm so early on, which is why normally I would try to continue reading past the 100-page mark. But honestly, this book is just leaving more question marks in my head, and I don't know how I feel about it. I really want to like this book. And I even checked the reviews on Goodreads, Storygraph. A lot of people gave this book pretty high regards and praise, especially for a new book like this. I had no intentions picking this up at all. I came across this book at Barnes & Noble. It was part of the new release section, which was at the very front of the store, and I thought the cover was so striking, so I picked up a copy at the library. And the story is following a 41-year-old woman who is a literary scholar. Her life is stable, she has a husband, and despite her marriage, she has a very passionate kiss with a stranger one day, and her entire life kind of flips upside down. She's, questioning her life, her career, herself as a person. And I can tell just from reading the first few pages that the story will ensue a very, I'd say, evocative and also chaotic, yet a defining spiral for the main character. The very first sentence is already pretty captivating. It says, when Ina, the main character, discovered sex at the age of 41, her whole life turned upside down. That alone kind of caught my attention, so I wanted to give it a try. And because she is a literary scholar, there are a ton of literary references that I am unaware of. I do not know who they are talking about, what they are talking about, and I feel like I'm being lost in the loop. So the main character, she's also writing a book on Eugene O'Neill. I did not know who that was at first, and then I searched him up a few nights ago and found out that he's a playwright and his daughter married Charlie Chaplin. I actually went on a whole deep dive on the Chaplin and O'Neill family because I finished watching Avatar 3 a few months back. And I don't know why, but I did not recognize his name when I first saw it. Nevertheless, there were just a lot of references I was not sure of, and that kind of ruined my experience a little bit because I would have to go out of my way and search it up and then do a whole deep dive on that and then get back to the book to actually understand what is being talked about. The characters itself, as well as the story that plays out, they kind of deal with very complex emotions. And in all honesty, I am not in the right state of mind to be dissecting a book and analyzing it piece by piece. So a lot of the words and sentences, they're just kind of passing through my eyes and not into my head. And I find that extremely unfortunate because the prose is also very contemporary, yet has this elegance to it, like a literary scholar, like an actual literary scholar who is writing this book. And I believe Bonnie Friedman has written several nonfiction books before, and I believe she's also like a professor of some sort. Yeah, she was also a professor. She's written other books on poets and writers, so she has a lot of background knowledge about the literary field. I can definitely see that reflected in her writing. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to DNF this, unfortunately, because the more I keep reading it, the more I just cannot fully understand and comprehend the story. But hopefully one day I will get back to it. I do have a few more hours before I actually have to head out, so I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen instead for the remainder of this time. I did start this around the same time I started Don't Stop, and luckily for me, I am enjoying this. So just to piggyback off of what I've mentioned in the last clip, it's only been like 2 days since I last filmed that. I stopped by the library yesterday to pick up another book as an alternative to Don't Stop to read with Pride and Prejudice, and then I saw that they had Troubling Love by Elena Ferrante available, so I picked this one up. I did not have this on my TBR. I only had her Neapolitan Quartet. I am a bit hesitant to continue reading the second book to the series because after reading the first one last year, a part of me was not ready to read all 4 of those books back to back, and I have a very difficult time remembering names to begin with, so I might need to revisit My Brilliant Friend before I continue on. But I was missing a bit of her writing, so then I picked up Troubling Love and I've started about 30 pages of the book so far. That was besides the point because as I was at the library, I came across a flyer. So Bonnie Friedman, she's going to be doing a talk at the home library that I went to yesterday about her latest fiction novel, Don't Stop, with another writer. So I kind of wanted to listen in to hear what she has to say about her process about writing the book, her thoughts, and what led up to her writing Don't Stop. And maybe that will give me a push to continue reading this because I have a feeling I will end up liking it. I can't wait to see what she has to say. I'll bring you guys along with me as well. And if you're located in New York City, I highly recommend taking advantage of the New York Public Library, the Brooklyn Public Library. They host a lot of free events and courses. They do not cost anything aside from a bit of time from your day.
In midlife, I think many people who have lived a particular way, organizing their life in a way that makes sense and helps them overcome the obstacles. He lived his truth no matter what. So he's kind of a frightening figure that way.
It is a beautiful day out today. I actually did run some errands before this, but as I promised, I'm going to share the movies that I've watched this year and my thoughts on several of them. So I'm not a huge movie fanatic, but something about the movie releases this year has just been hitting for me, and a lot of them seem extremely intriguing and right up my alley. So I've written them down. I think last year I never really took the time or went out of my way to go to the movie theaters unless there was a movie that I am extremely interested in. I've watched 19 movies so far this year, and that's a very big accomplishment. I don't think I've ever watched 19 movies over the span of even 2 to 3 years. It's not that I don't really like watching movies, I actually do, but I get very picky when it comes to choosing movies that interests me. Here are the ones that I've watched this year. I'm gonna list them, and they are not in a particular order. Starting off with Zootopia 2, I rated it a 9 out of 10 because honestly, I really like the Zootopia franchise. I did also watch Devil Wears Prada 2. I also rewatched Devil Wears Prada in anticipation for the new sequel, but I'd honestly placed them around the same level. They were both good, but I don't think one was better than the other. I did like both of them, but I didn't love them as much as I liked the other movies that I've watched. And the only thing I really do appreciate is the way that they marketed the movie. I thought that was pretty clever. As always, Emily Blunt, Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, they all looked fantastic. The one thing I don't really like about the Devil Wears Prada movies, both of them, were the love lines. I think that was super unnecessary. The love lines for Anne Hathaway's character. Next on my list is Frankenstein, and I put this one a 10 out of 10. This was the first movie that I watched this year, I'm pretty sure. Out of all of the releases and movies that Jacob Elordi has acted in, I liked Frankenstein the most. I think he did a great job portraying the character. I never read the book, but I thought it was still pretty good. And I love the costume design and the way that the movie was directed and produced. I rewatched Pride and Prejudice because I was reading the book. I watched the 2005 adaptation, and from what I can tell, a lot of people tend to enjoy the 2005 adaptation out of all of the adaptations that's been released. I watched Now You See Me 3 and rewatched the first 2 movies in anticipation for the third release. I eat it up every time. They use the same structure for the way that the plot progresses, but I don't really mind it. And I honestly enjoy the characters and the wittiness of the script. I watched Avatar 3. I did not know anything about Avatar. Yeah, my friends just wanted to watch it, and I liked it. I always think anything that has to do with original lore building, it requires a lot of creativity, and every single thing that they include into the plot has to make sense. So for a storyline to be this complex, I always find it extremely commending. I watched The Housemaid as well. I rated this a 7. I didn't hate it. I also didn't love it too much, but I never read the book, and I honestly did not expect that plot twist. And no matter how many times I tried guessing throughout the movie, I couldn't see it coming. That might be on my end because I'm pretty slow when it comes to plot twists. Wuthering Heights, I went on a completely separate talk in a separate video that I posted. So if you're interested, I'll leave like an info card to that. I rated it a 6 out of 10. I did like the costume design though. I also did like the production and the atmosphere that they were able to evoke from the movie, from the book. Okay, the next one that I had listed was Terry Jo, A Missionary in Miami. Me and my friends, we have like a running joke, and we love the character of Terry Jo. This story, or the plot of this movie, was supposed to be extremely nonsensical and ridiculous, which I had expected, but it has to make sense. This, however, did not make any sense, and I was slightly disappointed just because Terry Jo's character in the movie isn't the same as I usually see the Terry Jo posted on social media. And because of that, I rated it pretty low. Yeah, that was just for a little giggle here and there. I watched the first Scary Movie so that I could prepare myself for Scary Movie 6. And it's satirical. It's meant to be just for laughs. I also watched the Scooby-Doo movie. This was just free on YouTube. but I'm not gonna lie, I did skim through it. Again, I couldn't have guessed the plot twist. Hoppers. I did really like Hoppers. It's a very typical Pixar Disney movie, I feel, but the way that the animators and the directors, story writers were able to execute a plot like Hoppers, I think it was done pretty well. Michael, I rated it a 10 out of 10. I think choosing Jafar Jackson to play Michael Jackson might be the best decision anybody can make. Everybody was phenomenal in that movie, but Jafar Jackson, he really just took it. It was incredible. I highly recommend watching it if you haven't. I watched She's a Man. That was part of my monthly favorites. Again, a very ridiculous plot, middle school humor. I'll eat it up each time. And it's a 2000 rom-com, so of course I would love it. The Super Mario Galaxy movie. I did watch the Super Mario movie, but the Galaxy movie was okay in my opinion. I didn't like it as much as I liked the first one, but it was still not bad. And finally, my most recent movie that I've watched was The Truman Show. I've never watched it before. It was free on YouTube, and it deserves all the praise that it gets because that movie was so ahead of its time. So those are the movies that I watched this year, and I do have several on here that I've listed. Some of the more recent to-be-released movies that I have were Scary Movie 6, Backrooms. The Sheep Detectives and Obsession, they're already released, but I haven't watched those and they're on my watch list. As always, stay safe and thank you for stopping by.